I'm going to go ahead and close the source code, and I'm going to jump back to the resource pack directory, and I'm going to open up the 10th step, which is called multidimensional arrays. Again, this is in the strings and variables folder. Let's go ahead and copy the code and paste it over the code that's currently in the test.php file and save it. So far, we've used both strings and integers as values inside of an array, but we can also use arrays as values inside of arrays. And what this does is allow us to create a hierarchy of data, or a multidimensional array. Now, since we're thinking of arrays as lists, you can think of a multidimensional array as a list that has bullet points, and then within those bullet points there are subsections. So let's first take a look at how we create a multidimensional array. The structure will be the same as when we created our previous arrays. We're going to use the array function, and then we're going to assign a set of values within that array function. But notice here that we're using new lines in order to assign each item. Again, this is because PHP ignores whitespace, so we're simply using this structure in order to organize our data in a more meaningful way. This is a lot easier to read than if everything was on a single line. So the first item that we're adding to this array has the key of George, and we're assigning it a value of another array. So you see here we have a nested array, and this is the definition of a multidimensional array. This array is simply an array like we used before, with a set of keys and values. The key here is birth year, the value is 1972. The next key is fave band, and the value is the cure. And the next index or key is shoe size, and the value is 10. So this array is an associative array here, but since it's within another array, now the entire thing is a multidimensional array, and each item inside of it has its own key. The next item inside of my array has the key of Sally, and then the value of another array, which includes birth year, fave band, and shoe size as well. The next one has a key of Deepak, and the same types of values as well. So in this example, what we have is a list of people. These are their first names, and then we have some data associated with each one. The key is a description of the data, and then the value is the value of it. And you see that the keys are the same for each item here. Now, if you imagine working with an Excel spreadsheet, each one of these keys would be similar to a column title, for example. So across the top, you'd see birth year, favorite band, and shoe size, and down each column, you'd see a list of the values. Now, we can't use a grid inside of code, but this is pretty close. Now, just like in our previous array examples, we demonstrate here how to add a new item to it. So this should be pretty intuitive if you grasp the other array examples. We're using the square brackets in order to wrap around the index name, which is Lucy, and then we're assigning it a value. In this case, we're assigning it an array value that includes a list of data about this particular person: birth year, fave band, and shoe size. Now, one thing that might look a little bit strange here is that the very last item here includes a comma. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of our previous examples where we worked with an associative array. And you see we have our items separated with commas, which makes sense, but this last item here doesn't have a comma at the end of it. When we move everything to a new line, while we're working with multidimensional arrays here, we are adding a comma to the very end. The reason is that if we want to extend this array, it's a common error to forget this comma at the end as we add a new item. So for example, if I copy this line and paste it right here and we rename the index to something else, if there's no comma here, I have to add it manually, and I might forget. PHP allows us to add this comma at the very end without any ill effects, and so it makes sense to do it in order to prevent accidents later on. Okay, so we've looked at how to create a multidimensional array, and we've looked at how to add an additional item to it. Let's go ahead and look at how to reference the data inside of it. I'm going to go ahead and uncomment out this first line under this referencing a value inside of a multidimensional array example. Now, just like before, we're using the square brackets in order to indicate the index that we want to display the value of. But in this case, because there's arrays within arrays, we can use square brackets again in order to further indicate what index within this index we want to reference. So if we just use this first index, Sally, what we would return is this entire array here, because here Sally is the index and here's the entire value of that item. But we need to use one more index in order to reference one of these pieces of data, So we do so by using another set of square brackets and using the index of that second array, and this will return the value associated with that index. So in this case, we would return Coldplay. If we save this file and jump back to the browser and refresh, sure enough, we'd see Coldplay displayed in the browser. I'm going to jump back to the editor, and let's go ahead and uncomment out this next line here. Now this is just another example of referencing an item within a multi-dimensional array. The structure is the same here, except we're just pointing to the dpoc index and the shoe size index within this array. If we save this and jump back to the browser and refresh, we'd see dpoc's shoe size right here. Let's jump back to the editor and scroll down. And let's take a look at a couple of different var dumps. What I'm going to do is recomment out these two print statements here to clean up the output. And let's uncomment out the second example, which shows us a var dump of one of the arrays within this multi-dimensional array. This has the index of Lucy, so we should expect to see the data associated with Lucy here. Let's go ahead and save this and jump back to the browser and refresh. And let's look at the source code. So here's the var dump. We see it's an array and it has 3 items in it. The first item has a key of birth year and an integer value of 1984. The second has an index of fave band, and the value is a string that has 11 characters, and the value is the Beatles. And finally, we have shoe size with a value which is an integer of 9. Now what happens if we use var dump on the whole multi-dimensional array? Let's go ahead and close this source code and jump back to the editor. We'll recomment out this var dump, and let's uncomment out this last example here. So this is a var dump of the entire multi-dimensional array called myArray. I'm going to go ahead and save this and jump back to the browser and refresh. And I'm going to open up the source code so we can take a look. So you can see that the output of this var dump is structured very similarly to our code for creating the multi-dimensional array in the first place. It's an array. It has 4 items. The first item has a key of George, and it has a value of an array. And this array has 3 items. It has birth year, fave band, and shoe size. And if you keep looking down, we'll see Sally's, dpoc, and Lucy's data as well. Just like we indented things in our code in order to make it more readable, the var dump function also indents the data so we can easily see what data is associated with what level of the multi-dimensional array. Now in this example, we have 2 levels of a multi-dimensional array, but the levels can go even deeper. You can have arrays within arrays within arrays, and there's pretty much no limit to the depth of the array that you can have. Now again, the only difference between a multi-dimensional array and an associative array is that instead of assigning a variable that has a single value to an index, we're assigning an array to the index which can contain multiple values, and that in turn can contain values that include arrays as well.